Okay, and today we're moving into that second unit on social studies. So we're starting Unit 2, Lesson 1, Geography and History. And the things here, I'd mentioned as we were closing out Unit 1 over those last few days, a lot of what we're going to see, particularly in this lesson, but as we move on, taking some of those map skills and things that we learned through those first few lessons and applying them, adding a little bit of critical thinking to analyzing some history and stuff like that. So we'll jump in here and take a look and see what we have. Oh, and new unit. So we'll have one of the GED stories here to start with. And today we have Mary Lou Retton. So Mary Lou Retton dropped out of high school after her freshman year. This did not prevent her, however, from earning a GED credential and 5 Olympic medals. Retton's path to success began when she was an 8-year-old gymnast watching the 1976 Summer Olympics on TV. She dedicated herself to training and left school to train. She practiced relentlessly. Her hard work paid off. After winning various competitions, including the American Cup and Japan's Chunichi Cup in 1983, Retton qualified for the 1984 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles. But political and military tensions between the United States and the then Soviet Union were high. In response to the American boycott of the 1980 Summer Olympics in Moscow, the Soviet Union and other Eastern European countries boycotted the 1984 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles. Not allowing her recent knee operation to deter her, 16-year-old Retton became the first American woman to win a gold medal in gymnastics. Patriotic pride rose across the United States. Adding to this historic victory, she also won 2 silver medals and 2 bronze medals. Retton retired from gymnastics in 1986 and attended the University of Texas. She's appeared in films and television programs and served as an expert commentator for gymnastics and Olympic events. Today, Mary Lou Retton works as a motivational speaker and helps encourage the benefits of exercise and health nutrition. I'm guessing that you all are either way too young or were not born in 1984 to remember Mary Lou Retton. But I do. I remember that Olympic really well. She was she got the attention that, like Simone Biles gets today. She wasn't the gymnast that Simone Biles is, but, nobody is, right? But there was that level of attention when we were watching her. And I'm a West Virginian. Mary Lou's from West Virginia. So we were, in particular, really just, watching those Olympics and watching her events and seeing how well she did. So, yeah, she's a person that, as far as like Olympic personality, like Bruce Jenner back in the 70s, Mary Lou Retton, and some of these other people, that it's just one of those names that you recognize. And yeah, so like she had her moment in 1984. And then, after she came out, she did the McDonald's commercials and all this stuff, but she was a huge name at that time. And then, so yeah, there you go. She's from Fairmont. And first woman to win an Olympic gold. Sportswoman of the Year, inducted, Gymnastics Hall of Fame in '97, and then served on USA Gymnastics Board of Directors and the Children's Miracle Network. So she was like at that forefront where American women's gymnastics just skyrocketed into popularity and being super competitive over the last 3 decades. So anyway, that's Mary Lou. All right. Now we're going to start on sort of more of the history side of the social studies and sort of including geography here. So this piece here, we're dealing with some aspects of the military. So to start off here, it's throughout its short but momentous history, the United States has defended its citizens and millions worldwide through its progressive military strength and intelligence forces. As history changes, so too does the role of our military. Women have served in the U.S. Armed Forces since 1775. They nursed the wounded, laundered clothes, and cooked for the troops. In 1944, as Allied forces fought in World War II, Women's Army Corps, the WAC units, supported combat troops. But it was not until 2013 that the Defense Department authorized women to serve on an equal basis alongside their male counterparts, removing the remaining barrier to equality in the services. Recent wars, such as those in Iraq and Afghanistan, lacked real front lines, and thousands of women soldiers found themselves in combat situations. By 2016, women will be fully integrated into frontline positions within the military. We see this is dated a little bit. This is about 5 years old, or actually a little older than that. American history is dynamic, ever-changing with the times. The importance of understanding U.S. history extends to the GED social studies test, where it makes up about 20% of all questions. As with other areas of the GET test, U.S. history questions will test your ability to interpret text and visuals, such as tables, graphs, and timelines. And maps, should say maps. Unit 2 helps you prepare for the GED social studies test. All right. And so for this lesson, by the time we complete it, you're going to be able to analyze the context of a map and how that context connects with the historical period or event. So we're integrating those two ideas now a little more completely, right? We started doing that in Unit 1 by analyzing those maps, learning those elements of a map, and then, slowly adding in some bits of history with it. And we're just going to kind of continue that. All right, and here's a little bit of audio.
To understand how to relate geography and history, you must first analyze the context of a physical, political, or other type of map, and how that context connects with the historical period or event. All of the map skills you have learned thus far will help you make these connections. As with other areas of the GED test, geography and United States history questions will test your ability to interpret information at various depth of knowledge levels through the use of complex reading skills and thinking skills.
Yep. So we're just integrating everything we've learned so far and moving forward with more of a historical perspective now. Okay. And our first map here, the Northwest Territory in 1787. We actually got a little bit of this. Remember yesterday when we were looking at the map of the countries that ceded territory to the United States. And there was a big, huge chunk of land, of course, that was part of the 13 original colonies that Britain seceded when we won the Revolutionary War in 1783. So now we're going to talk specifically about the Northwest Territory, which was part of that area ceded by Britain. So in 1787, Congress created a territory west of the Pennsylvania, north of the Ohio River, east of the Mississippi River, and south of the Great Lakes. The Northwest Ordinance established a government and the formation of 3 to 5 states. There shall be formed in the said territory not less than 3 nor more than 5 states, and the boundaries of the states shall become fixed and established as follows. And it is further understood and declared that the boundaries of these 3 states shall be subject so far to be altered to form 1 or 2 states in that part of the said territory, which lies north of an east and west line drawn through the southerly bend or extreme of Michigan. All right, so, and we know here we have Ohio, we have Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And we know, Michigan is separated here by the lakes. This part on the tip of Wisconsin is also part of Michigan, and then a little bit of what's going to be Minnesota later in that upper western side of the map. But we're not really dealing with Minnesota in this map so much. You could also see how the lakes and like the Ohio River forms the southern border there, and the Mississippi River forms some of the border of Wisconsin and Illinois. And you'd see where, where there's basically man-made borders, right? Because they're very straight lines. They run like right across and up and down. So we can really tell that those are man-made borders rather than natural borders created by, a lake or a river. And, that's the same thing. If you look at the eastern United States, you have all these natural borders that create the states, like the Ohio River and things like that. When you get out to the western states, you'll notice a lot of them are just big blocky chunks. That's because you don't have the same amount of rivers where you create natural borders and things like that. So they're often just divided by just space on a map, just land on a map. And then our text box here, it says, note that the details in the passage concerning the minimum and maximum number of states. How many states are described? Now compare and contrast the information with the information on the map. So yeah, like it said in our text, we're talking about 5 states. We have 5 complete states in that area. So no more than 5, no less than 3 was what was intended for the Northwest Ordinance. And that's exactly what we got. All right, so we'll move on to the quiz now. So popping over to Unit 2, Lesson 1 quiz. And I think it's only like a few questions this time. Okay, so again, our little map. And so making assumptions, our text box here says you can assume that the dotted lines shown on the map represent the present day boundaries of the states created by the provisions of the Northwest Ordinance. And yeah, I mean, we can assume that because most of us are familiar with the shape of the states. And we could see, those dotted lines were basically created. That's the man-made borders, and the rest were created by the lakes and the rivers. And our first question. So ultimately, how many complete states were formed from the Northwest Territory? Was it A3, B4, C5, or D6? Anybody give? I'm sorry, go ahead.
B4.
It was 5. C5. And I was looking at this yesterday. I realized that, part of Minnesota is in there as well. But we had to not think, because they're asking for the complete number of states. And the only complete ones we have from that is Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, and Ohio. Okay, so that is C. One is C5. Okay, and another little text box here. So in the early 1900s, more than 1 million African Americans, pushed by discrimination and poor economic conditions in the rural South, migrated north and west in an event called in an event that became known as the Great Migration. The migration began around 1916, lessened during the Great Depression, and increased again during World War II and after. Northern cities such as New York, Chicago, Cleveland, and Detroit saw the greatest African American population increases. Manufacturing and other urban jobs led African Americans to these cities. Moving to cities also caused growth in African American literacy and an African American cultural explosion. Many Southern African American artists, authors, and musicians converged on New York City because it was seen as a cultural center of the United States. And we see that sort of migration pattern in the map here. So our map key shows the South Central to Midwest migration in the darker red color. And in the lighter red color, we see Southeast to Northeast migration. And we're splitting here, the lighter shade of green on the map is showing basically the southern states, what was always considered like below the Mason-Dixon line. And then, of course, a lot of these were the former Confederate states. and the dark green being what's considered the northern states. And yeah, there was like basically two areas. You had, from this part of the South, the Southeast, in particular, moving more towards New York and Massachusetts, into the New York, Boston, Baltimore area, and then in your deep South, Mississippi, Alabama, more movement up towards Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, those Midwest cities. St. Louis is a little off of this, but it also was one of those migration. It was kind of like we talked about the roundabout of Asia. That was sort of the roundabout of migration there. And of course, you had a lot of people stay in St. Louis, and you had a lot move on towards Chicago. But that's kind of outside of the migration pattern here. Okay. So our question here then, the easternmost, we're going to have some fill in the blank too. So got to watch your spelling on these. And probably a good time. We talked about this some before, if you need to sort of review your states on the map and knowing the location of the states, kind of think about that as we go through some more of the geography, because it's going to come up. But here, question, the easternmost state to which African Americans from Florida and Georgia migrated during the Great Migration was, which state do we have here? So it's going to be Massachusetts, right? Because that's the farthest east, further east than New York, and further east than Philadelphia and New Jersey. It sticks out there a little further. So Massachusetts is what we need to type in here. And let's see how good my spelling is today. I think that's right. So Massachussetts. And I think from my experience, spelling does count on these. We're going to see if I get anything wrong. And again, it's one of those situations as far as we're moving through the quizzes and the workbooks. If we miss one here, don't worry about it. We know the right answer. Sometimes that'll happen if we misspell something, something along those lines. I don't think you run into a lot of like fill in the blank on the exam, but keep that in mind as far as your spelling and stuff, that you want to be accurate if that were the case. Right, so Massachusetts for number 2. And one final map here. So in 1845, writer John O'Sullivan proclaimed that it would be the fulfillment of our manifest destiny to overspread the continent allotted by Providence. Proving O'Sullivan correct, settlers cut trails and pushed the boundaries of the United States west near the Pacific Ocean. And so it's this idea that we're going to encounter called manifest destiny. And we'll probably see it come up here and there. The idea that it was sort of this will of God that we expanded across the country from the eastern United States, the Midwest, and continue to settle the western expanse of North America, or of our U.S. territory. And we have the routes here. And also wanted to show you this painting real quick from the 1870s, which is sort of a visual representation of manifest destiny. This idea of moving west. The lady in the center here is Columbia, and she's sort of the female embodiment of America, sort of the way Uncle Sam becomes during World War I. She's sort of like the, Lady Britannica, which is sort of the British version. We have these sort of representations of, and Columbia is often considered sort of this old world term for the new world, and particularly America. And we see, this progress, these stagecoaches and these wagons, the train, the telegraph line, the railroad, all this moving towards the west. and all this American progress that's happening. Of course, the artist had no qualms about basically showing the Native Americans getting steamrolled by the so-called American progress and getting run off their land. So that's also a big issue with what was seen as manifest destiny, is that whoever was there before didn't really matter, and they were basically in the way. Sadly enough, we also see the buffalo there getting chased off, which was hunted near extinction in that time period throughout the mid 1800s due to they would just shoot buffalo off of trains because they knew that the Native Americans, that was a big source of their food. That was a big food source. That was, they use a lot of materials from that, as far as leather and things like that, bone. And they were just straight out murdering buffalo to reduce the population, which in turn reduced the population of Native Americans. But we see the Western expansion here. So the Gila Trail or Gila Trail, I'm not exactly sure how that's pronounced, and the dark red that runs through the Southwest states. The Santa Fe Trail, also running along that, and connects with the Gila Trail when we get into New Mexico. The broken red line is the Oregon Trail. You may have heard of the famous old text game from the old computer systems. That I think that it's now like a board game, and then there's the TV show. What's the name of that TV show? Miracle Workers, which is a really funny show. It has like Daniel Radcliffe on it, Harry Potter himself, and it's like one of those anthology shows where every season it's a different theme, but they use the same actors, sort of like American Horror Story. It's the same people in different roles. And there's one right now. It's about the Oregon Trail. It's really funny. The light gray broken is the Mormon Trail. We had this Mormon movement from the Midwest into Utah in that time, where they settled at Salt Lake City, Provo, a lot of areas in Utah. And then the broken black dotted line is for the California Trail, that also sort of moved through that sort of mid continental area, just above Colorado, through Wyoming and then down into California. Okay, so, and only one question here. So settlers traveling to Los Angeles, California from Independence, Missouri, so right here, out to California, would most likely have used the blank and the blank trails. So looking here, basically it's the combined trail. So they're going to use the Santa Fe. That's two words, S-A-N-T-A space F-E, and the Gila Trail, or Gila. The Santa Fe and Gila. These are answers for number 3. S-A-N-T-A space F-E and G-I-L-A. Give everybody a second there to catch up.
Can you say one more time, please?
Santa Fe,
Yes.
S-A-N-T-A-F-E, and Gila is G-I-L-A. And the only 3 questions we have for the quiz. So 1 was C, 2 was Massachusetts, and 3 was Santa Fe and Gila. Right. So I will submit that. Yeah, and I'm going to put them in the chat too here, because I got some people using the chat today. I think it's 1L. Okay. All right. So we'll submit. Let's see how our spelling is. So yeah, number 1 was 5, 2, is Massachusetts. And also remember, with things like this, of course, with your states, bodies of water, anything like that, make sure you capitalize. We'll run into that lesson at some point in language arts, but yeah, so Massachusetts for number 2, and yeah, Santa Fe and Gila for number 3. Okay, and we'll move on over to the workbook. Let's see here. Yeah, okay, so now we're on Unit 2, Lesson 1, Relate Geography and History Workbook. And so just reiterating, when relating geography and history, remember to look for similarities and differences among sources of information and to recall what you already know about the topic. Then combine this data to fill in gaps in information. So that's all sort of, an idea of critical thinking here. What's missing, taking information we've learned in the past to, fill in any gaps in our knowledge, or any gaps in the information being presented to us. And it says down here, so again, refining the skill of relating geography and history, you will improve your study and test taking abilities, especially as they relate to the GED. Dropping down, it says historical events can affect geography. Often geography affects history. The Northwest Territory added land to the United States that would eventually become the 5 states outlined in the map below, and a small part of a 6th state, which we were talking about, so Minnesota. And now they give us the names, right? So we got Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. Our text box over here says, geographical features such as lakes and rivers form many of the borders of the states created from the Northwest Territory. And then down here, the Ohio River, which we've talked about quite a bit, may have been part of a shifting political boundary, but as a physical characteristic, it never changes, right? It doesn't move, and it eventually determined, the shape of the states in this part of the U.S. But again, how geography shapes those territories, right? In the long run, that means it shaped. We don't think about it this way, but the Ohio River, because of the size of the states and where those borders are, that's to some degree determine how many members in the House of Representatives that we have, right? Because of the population of our state and things like that. Economically, the Ohio River, we moved a lot of different items up and down the river. You can still today see barges of coal and things like that going on the river. So earlier, you would see different types of goods before, tractor trailers on roads or trains. Even you would see stuff moving up and down the river on barges. So, just this huge impact, the way the physical geography determined, what was produced where and how and by whom. So big, important aspect of migration, economy, all of that with the physical makeup of a region. All right, so I'm hitting start there. We'll go into the workbook. Looks like we're starting with our Northwest Territory map again. So let's see what the question says. So historical events can affect geography. Geography affects history. And our test taking tip here, so use dates and other facts presented on maps to place geography into a historical context. For example, think about why the writers of the Northwest Ordinance used bodies of water as political boundaries for states. Well, it was easy, right? You didn't have to use surveyors to go out there. And if you knew where the river was, that was as good a place as any to put a border. And that's been used around the world. A lot of the Afghanistan border with Pakistan was created because of they looked at watershed. So half the water run down one way, half the water ran down the other way. And some British dude said, well, this is where the border's going to be. And unfortunately, a lot of times they're arbitrary, and that causes, other types of tensions with, culturally or politically with the groups that lived there. But in our case, it was all, basically British settlers who then became American citizens that formed the state. So there was a lot less contention in how they were formed, and bodies of water were just as good as any way to make those borders. Okay, and then based on the map, which of the following most completely lists the geographic features that form part of Michigan's border? So is it just Lake Michigan and Lake Huron, Lake Superior, Lake Huron, Lake Erie, and Lake Michigan, Lake Superior, Lake Huron, Lake Erie, and the Ohio, or Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, and the Ohio? So we'll take another look at Michigan here. Got Michigan right here and Michigan down here. So what bodies of water basically dictate the shape of Michigan?
A.
It's
Yes.
B.
B.
So, yeah, so you're on the right track, but it's all 4 of these Great Lakes, right? So Lake Superior, this upper side of Michigan that's connected to Wisconsin, right? That's shaping part of it. Lake Michigan, that's kind of self-explanatory, right? We could assume that Lake Michigan is part of the coast, the lake coast of Michigan. Lake Huron on the other side, and then just barely right here next to Ohio, it does share a little bit of Lake Erie with Ohio there. So that's the 4, that's B. And if you're ever looking for a good mnemonic, like a good hint to remember the names of the Great Lakes, use the mnemonic Holmes. So HOMES gives you the first letter for all of the lakes: Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, and Superior. All right, so number 1 is B. In our Northwest Territory map again, it says, based on the map and the passage, which of the following states of the Northwest Territory shares a border with both the Ohio and Mississippi rivers? So only one on the map here does. Which one are we looking at here? So the Ohio River down here, Mississippi, way up here, comes down. So I think our answer is D, right? D is in dog. Illinois being the only one. So Indiana, Ohio, lots of states have a border with the Ohio River, right? Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky. So lots of states share that border. But down here, the only ones that connect both Mississippi and the Ohio is the Illinois. Okay, so D, Illinois. Oh, okay, so a new text passage here. So we're going to study the map and read the passage. I think this is, back to our Oregon Trail, Westward Trails map. In the mid-1800s, William Henry Hart traveled the California Trail. He kept a diary of his adventures. So this is basically, out of his diary. This is June 22nd, rolled out early. Road very bad, being all hills, steep and rocky, up mountains and down vales, over or around the rocky ridges, with many a sudden creek or steep pitch. I was driver, and on one of the steepest rock descents, my lock chain became loosened, and the wagon instantly commenced going down much faster than was proper, and threatened to crowd the team off the side of the road into a deep ravine. In trying to catch the wheel with my hands, I put my foot too near it, and immediately my My right great toe underwent a flattening process that was decidedly disagreeable. Sorry. So a flattening process that was decidedly disagreeable. I was still striving to stop the wagon, however, when I was reinforced by Streeter and Reed, who had not been far off, and by the driver of the succeeding team. By each catching a wheel, we stopped the wagon and relocked it. So I'm guessing he had a few choice words for the flattening of his toe that day. Yeah, so one thing I want to point out, particularly when you look at historical in writing about history and when you're quoting things, if you see these little brackets around words, that's sort of like an insertion by the author. So what's happened here, they're basically making an assumption of what was said. So if this was like in a diary and it was old and it might have been worn, some words might be missing, right? They might have been smeared or erased. So the author has asserted what he most likely believes completes that sentence. So, like was and of, that's him telling us, it's like, I did not see this word, so I'm making an assumption of what was there. You'll also see them when a word is misspelled. So, again, like if there's something that was misspelled by the original author, they'll have brackets around it to let you know. It's like, yes, I understand this word was misspelled, but this is how it appears in the text. So we'll see that from time to time in the class. Okay, so let's see what our question is here. So based on the passage, Hart encountered these three land formations on the California Trail. And I believe if we go back up towards the top there, right off the bat, he says, road very bad, being all hills, steep and rocky, up mountains and down vales. So our answer is going to be hills, Hills, mountains. I probably shouldn't capitalize that. Hills, mountains, mountains, vales, vales. Give you all a second there to type that in. Hills, mountains, and vales. Okay. Oh, Nelda's in the chat saying what was funny. I was just commenting on the guy getting his toe flattened by the wagon. I just thought that was kind of the way he says it was disagreeable. It's a very kind of politically correct way of saying that he was in probably immense pain when he got his toes run over. Okay, so number 3 is hills, mountains, and vales. Okay, and so again with the same passage, westward trails here. Based on the map, the California Trail intersects with the blank trail. So California Trail.
Is it the Oregon Trail?
Yep, it is the Oregon Trail, right? It's the broken red line there, the dotted red line. California Trail is the black dotted line. Basically, you would, start on the Oregon Trail. If you want to go on to Oregon, you'd stay on the Oregon Trail. If you wanted to continue down into California, you would then get off and get onto the California Trail. So that is Oregon, Oregon Trail. And again, watch your capitalization. That should be capitalized. Okay. So number 4 is Oregon. Number 5, our same passage. Okay, so based on the passage, Hart faces a situation that is dangerous for settlers on the westward trails, losing control of his
Wagon.
Yeah, W-A-G-O-N. Yeah, I think it says right here. As he actually mentions, yeah, it mentions wagon. My lock chain became loosened and the wagon, whoa, didn't mean to highlight everything. The wagon instantly commenced going down much faster. So wagon for number 5. Okay. Yep. And new passage. I think we're about halfway finished here. So again, we're going to read the passage. We'll look at the map. It's going to be a map of, yeah, Washington and Valley Forge. So 1 second here. Okay. The events leading to General George Washington's Continental Army spending the winter at Valley Forge in Pennsylvania began in August 1777, when British forces landed at the top of Chesapeake Bay with the objective of taking Philadelphia, which was then the American capital. The Americans were defeated at the Battle of Brandywine on September 11th. Philadelphia was left undefended as members of the Continental Congress fled to York above Lake Ontario, where the capital was reestablished. The British then took Philadelphia on September 26, 1777. The Continental Army suffered another British defeat at the Battle of Germantown, just north of Philadelphia, on October 4th. General Washington led his disheartened army to Valley Forge to spend the winter and prepare for battle in the spring. Washington chose Valley Forge, located 18 miles northwest of Philadelphia, because it was easily defensible. The geographic barriers formed by Mount Joy, Mount Misery, and the Schuylkill River put Washington's troops in position to protect the Continental Congress at York. Locating there also kept the British out of central Pennsylvania. No battle was fought at Valley Forge, yet it was a turning point of the American Revolution. The Continental Army faced terrible odds, particularly eastern Pennsylvania's harsh, cold winter weather. Many soldiers became sick, died, or deserted. Most did not have proper clothing or boots. The troops at Valley Forge largely subsisted on dried or salted meat, peas, beans, pears, apples, and corn. By February, somewhat more clement weather arrived, and by March, food and supplies showed up. By April, German Baron Frederick von Steuben arrived in camp with a letter of introduction from Benjamin Franklin, who he had met in Paris. Von Steuben tirelessly helped General Washington in drilling the troops and in their strategies for training, reestablishing their confidence. On June 19, 1778, 6 months later, a renewed army pulled out of Valley Forge toward New Jersey to fight the British. And that was the long, hard winter that the Continental Army faced. It doesn't mention it here, but also the other problem that Washington had was that most of his soldiers had signed up for a 1-year enlistment. And it was over the course of that winter that their enlistments were up, and he had to convince a bunch of his soldiers to stay and fight. And, they're all looking around. It's like, hey, this is awful. We don't want to be here. We don't want to do this anymore. So he really struggled in an uphill battle trying to convince these men to stay and fight. And then he gets help from von Steuben and others to train them, because these are all, not professional soldiers. They're all mostly militia, and he has to whip them into shape into an army. So it was an uphill battle all the way. And, Washington lost more battles than he won, but it worked out in the end for us, I guess. And our map there. So little convoluted, but we see the black lines there are the movements of British forces from around August 25th down here at Head of Elk in Maryland, and our sort of fuchsia colored arrows are the Continental Army, Washington's forces, and that shows various points there. A lot of information, right? So we get the battles, we have names of cities, we have bodies of water, like the Delaware River, the Brandywine. A lot of times those battles were named after either the town they were closest to or the body of water they were closest to. And then up here, Valley Forge towards the top of the map, where the Continental Army wintered from 77 into 78. Okay, so let's see what our questions are here. Okay, so General Washington selected Valley Forge as his encampment for the winter of 77, 78 because of these three geographical features. So,
Mount Misery, Mount Joy, and the Schuylkill River.
yeah, there you go. Mount Misery, Mount Joy, and I'm going to try to spell this off the top of my head, and then I'll go back and look and see if I got it right. The Schuylkill River. Okay, so Mount Misery, Mount Joy. See how close I got. Yes, Schuylkill. So those three physical elements helped protect his forces from the British Army and helped protect the members of the Continental Congress from being invaded or taken prisoner. So number 6 there is Mount Misery, Mount Joy, and the Schuylkill River. Schuylkill. Okay.
One more time, please. The last one.
Schuylkill?
Yeah, CH.
Yeah, Misery, Joy, and Schuylkill is Schuylkill.
Thank you.
No problem. All right. And number 7. So same passage there. And same little map. So based on the context of the passage, this is a word that you probably don't see very much. Does the word clement mean harsh or mild?
Harsh.
Well, there's another word that sounds a lot like that, right? Have you heard of inclement weather?
Right.
Okay, so inclement weather is harsh. Now, if we remove the IN off of it, right? Clement weather is mild. And I don't think I have ever encountered that word before. I didn't know. I just thought inclement. I've heard that before.
Right.
You'll hear the weatherman talk about it.
Right.
Right. We're in for some inclement weather and stuff like that. Clement weather. I've never heard that used.
I never.
But yeah, so when you run into something like that, it's like, okay, does it sound like something else I've heard? This is like those crazy kids that do the spelling bees, like right, they'll ask for the origin of the word and things like that, and all these words come from these different roots and things like that. So you kind of think, and the context of the passage, right? You look for context clues. So when now I'm going to find the word. Yeah, so right here at the last paragraph of that first sentence. So by February, somewhat more clement weather arrived. Yeah, so mild for number 7. MILD. Okay. And then one final passage here, one final map for social studies today. Okay, so by 1812, Britain and France were at war. The British stopped U.S. ships from supplying Europe. They captured American sailors and forced them to serve on British ships. France began to show an equal disregard for the rights of the Americans at sea, but Americans remembered that France had come to the aid of the Continental Army in the American Revolution against Britain. Thus, the United States sided with France and went to war against Britain to protect its own shipping rights. The War of 1812 lasted just 18 months. Neither side won much in the treaty that ended the war, but the United States established its sea rights and gained the respect of foreign nations. And, that's the way you can kind of look at the War of 1812. It really finished what the Revolutionary War or the American Revolution started. Over the course of those decades, after the end of the American Revolution, Britain oddly enough, was the greatest, received the most benefit from the American Revolution, because France, in helping us, went in considerable debt. And so you sort of took France off the table as a big power player, and someone that was a big threat to British control and the British Empire. So they were worried about handling their debt. They were in the midst of their own revolution, and that gave Britain some space to just, expand like crazy and keep building their navy and just take over the world, honestly. And, the reason people in India speak English now, or basically the reason anybody speaks English anywhere in the world, is because of the British Empire, because of their influence, because of the way they dominated. And so when we get to 1812, there's this, they would, capture American ships on sea, and they would inter American sailors and force them into the British Navy. So that was one of the issues. And then there were several others as far as trade and things like that. So the War of 1812 was basically our way of saying, look, we are not part of the British Empire. We established our independence in 1776. We fought a war, and the War of 1812 basically closed that chapter between us and Britain. And it was like it says, there wasn't much gained, but it sort of bookended that period in time and our relationship with Britain. So that's about the best way to explain the War of 1812 without getting into a lot of details. So a lot of the campaigns were fought along the border of Canada. And there was a campaign. There was a lot of activity in the southern states around Louisiana and New Orleans. But here it's showing us some American victories, some British victories, some of the American offensive, so movement of those troops, and same with the British troops. So we see that from 1812 to 1814, and yep, some of the bigger battles there. So our question then says, based on the map and the passage, the primary reason for the United States entering the War of 1812 against Britain was to protect its blank rights.
Shipping rights.
There you go, shipping rights. At that time, Britain basically controlled all the seaways. They colonized a lot of places. They had settlements here. They had territories everywhere. But really, what made them the great empire that they were was control of the seas. They were the maritime sea power, and probably, the greatest one of all time, next to what the United States would become in the 20th century. Okay, so shipping rights for number 8. And then again with our little passage or map. So the 2 earliest American victories in the war were at the blank and the blank river. So all kinds of rivers here.
Got the York and the Thames River.
Yep. York, and I think it's Thames.
Oh.
Well, if it's, I didn't even realize, I don't know how I missed this. I've read books on War of 1812, and U.S. military history is what I study. Somehow I don't understand why I've missed that, but Thames is the river that runs through London, in Britain, and I'm obviously because that is all British territory at that point, and Canada's a Commonwealth. I imagine that it's also named for the same river. So yeah, so it's York and the Thames. So Y-O-R-K and the Thames River. Okay, and we're on to our last one here.
What is the second one? York and
Thames, Thames.
THA.
MES. Yep. All right, number 10, and I'll go back over them again before we submit it. Okay, so the Great Lakes include Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, Erie, and Lake Ontario. During the War of 1812, American and British conflicts took place near 4 of the Great Lakes. So looking at our map again, so 4 out of the 5 Great Lakes, we see basically campaigns and these military expeditions around Canada. So if you look at that, right, you could just process of elimination. We see up here, there's nothing around Lake Superior, right? Nothing going on over there.
So
So
Lake Erie.
yep, so it's Erie, Michigan, Huron, and Ontario. So I'm going to put Ontario. That's not Ontario, that's Ontario. Ontario. Huron. HURON. Michigan. MICHIGAN. And Erie, ERIE. So our 4 lakes are Ontario, Huron, Michigan, and Erie for number 10. And that is the end of Unit 2, Lesson 1. So I'll run through the workbook real quick here with the answers, okay? So number 1 was B as in boy. Number 2 was D as in dog. Number 3 was our 3 physical features. So it was hills, mountains, and vales. Number 4 was Oregon, OREGON. Number 5 was wagon. Number 6 was the Misery River, or I'm sorry, Mount Misery, MISERY, Mount Joy, JOY, and the Schuylkill River, SCHUYLKILL. Number 7 was mild. Number 8 was shipping rights, SHIPPING. Number 9, York and Thames. Thames, THAMES. And then 10 was Ontario, Huron, Michigan, and Erie. So Ontario, ONTARIO, Huron, HURON, Michigan, MICHIGAN, and Erie, ERIE. Let's double check our answers when we submit it. Okay, check mark, check marks, check, check. Checks. Checks. All right, looks like this is all going to work out. Okay, so any questions on that section?
The last one, you say